So, it would seem that I and some of my viewers are talking a little bit past each other when it comes to some of these isms I've been talking about lately, like the one on your screen right now. Now, the problem is that we start talking about these things without really defining what it is that we mean, right? I mean, there are so many different versions of capitalism, as I'm sure there are when it comes to socialism or whatever. So, what form of capitalism are you talking about? But it would seem that a lot of people think that the way they view capitalism is the only true form of capitalism, and that couldn't be further from the truth. But when I talk about capitalism, and I can't, reiterate that with every single video, but I have in the past, or at the very least, I've dropped clues. What I'm talking about, and if you're not going to define specifically which form of capitalism you're talking about, I would think it should be assumed that I'm talking about the purest version thereof, right? Pure capitalism. And I have talked about, carrying out the ideology of capitalism. It's an ideology to its logical conclusion to the extreme and what that would mean, right? So when I talk about capitalism, I would have thought it was obvious. That's what I'm talking about, right? And when you juxtapose, and I'm going to have to oversimplify for the sake of the argument here, because, we could get bogged down in, like, all these different versions of capitalism and socialism and all this other shit that I don't give a fuck about, okay? Because sometimes you just got to simplify this shit so you can talk about it, right? It's like all these rappers or poets who seem to want to communicate something by making shit more and more complex. Get the fuck out of here. You're not an artist. You're a phony intellectual. At any rate, when you juxtapose capitalism and socialism, there's a very clear line between the two, right? Capitalism is just private property, right? And socialism is what I have called public property in some videos, but more specifically, it's the commons, right? It's the property that we all own in common. And, when you juxtapose the two, when you don't define them specifically, I would have thought it was assumed that I was talking about both extremes, right? But maybe it wasn't. Maybe that was my failure to communicate. But, if you're going to engage me in this conversation on here, well, be sure that you know what it is that I'm talking about when I use the term capitalism. And if you don't, fucking ask. So as I stated in many, many videos, right? Purest form of capitalism. Unfettered capitalism, right? Capitalism on steroids. No holds barred capitalism, right? Is what the world that we find ourselves in today. It's exactly what it is. Every single piece of land on this planet is owned by somebody privately. Or, as I would say, it's privately. Technically, when it comes to legalese, there's such a thing as public property. Look, capitalism is an economic system based on the private ownership of the means of production, right? Land is a means of production, right? So if you have private ownership of the means of production, with land being the most important mean of production, right? What does that say? That means that all land is privately owned, because all land is productive in some way, shape, or form. Of course it is. Whether it's used for tourism or to mine something or to build a house on or grow food, all land is a potential means of production, right? So pure unfettered capitalism, everything is owned privately. Duh. And that is the world that we live in. And if you're a normie who doesn't understand that, then, we can't even have a conversation. it really doesn't matter where you're coming from because it's my channel, right? Of course. So, there are, as you will see later on, different forms of capitalism. And they feature varying degrees of free markets, public ownership. And public ownership. What do they mean by public ownership, right? This is more or less legalese for dumb people like me. State ownership, also called government ownership, and public ownership is the ownership of an industry asset or enterprise by the state or a public body representing a community as opposed to an individual or private party. Okay? So when we talk about public ownership in a capitalist system, what we're talking about is private property. It's just that it's like, it's held in trust, if you want to say that, right? The public is granted some access to these places, but all the parks close at 10, and there ain't shit you can do about that, right? Anyone is welcome at a state park, but you gotta pay a fee to get in. Right? They call it public property, but it's really private, right? Just because a large group of entitled people have access to it, okay, and a larger group of people maybe get to administer it and say what goes, that doesn't really make it public in the way that I mean public. It's not part of the commons, right? I would think that when we all say that something is public, right, publicly owned, the way us regular people understand that is as if it were a commons, right? We all are co-owners of that piece of land or capital or whatever, right? Means of production. But in a capitalist system, even though it's called that, it's not actually how we understand it. That's why I just simplify it and I call it private property, okay? Everything on this planet is owned privately. That's just how it is. It's just how it is. If you don't understand that, then we can't have a conversation, okay? Maybe you think I live in La La Land, maybe I think you do, but whatever. We can't have a conversation unless we have some kind of common ground. We understand each other. You come into my channel, you got to step into my realm. You got to understand what it is that I mean when I say capitalism, okay? And that's been I can't expect everybody to have seen every single one of my videos, but it is what it is. You're still coming over here. By the same token, you can't expect me to explain every single term that I use in any individual video, because it will take as long as this fucking one. So, when you start criticizing capitalism, the usual line of defense of the so-called capitalist that's not a business owner, right? Talk about useful idiots. Fucking hell. Still waiting for someone who's not a capitalist but says he's a capitalist to come around and fess up and be like, damn, what have I been thinking? Still waiting for that person. I know you're out there. Don't be shy. At any rate, what are we talking about here? When asked about, or whenever you criticize capitalism, the defenders, the ideologically possessed capitalist-loving people will say, that's not real capitalism, right? And then they'll criticize socialists for doing the same thing. Even though socialists, not to go on too much of a tangent, to me, there's more truth in their statement. Because when have we really had real socialism? When? We never really had, never. And for short periods of time when you might have had real socialism, like in Spain at one point in time, well, Franco took care of that, right? You can't have real socialism anywhere. And I'm not saying that that would appeal to me. But if a group of people get together and they decide to share everything, up to and including their wives, none of my fucking business. That's what they want to do. Let them do it, right? But we can't have that on this planet, right? Because that gives people the power over their lot. You might not agree with the direction they're headed in, but they got power to do whatever the fuck they want, right? That's the problem. Freedom is the problem. And when you zoom out from capitalism or state socialism or communism, they're one and the fucking same. Yeah, there's little differences in how the wealth is shared, right? It's more the in I would say in communism, for example, it's the ideologues, it's the intellectuals who hold most of the power, and in capitalism, it's the magnates, it's the landowners, it's the capitalists that hold the power. But in both systems, it's the elites. So whether you've been brainwashed with, communism or state socialism or capitalism, it's make no mistake, it's the elites brainwashing you to run their fucking game, basically for them and on your damn self, right? How many of you pro-capitalist pigs, no offense, oink oink, I'm just playing, guys, relax, are actually capitalists, right? How many of you actually own capital and use it to produce something, enrich yourself in your lives, and gain more capital? How many of you are actually doing that? How many of you actually own land? You don't. Because we live in a system where everything's privately owned already, right? Most of the wars have been fought and land has been stolen from these people, and systems that were uncomfortable for the capitalists and the socialists were removed from this planet. Whether it's capitalists or socialists, not to go on too much of a tangent, for all you Western civilization lovers, well, that's all that is. Both of these things, right? That's Western civilization. Own it. Man, this shit really isn't that difficult, man. You just gotta regurgitate that blue or the red fucking pill. That's all that this comes down to. Blue team, red team, capitalism, socialism, left, right. Get the fuck out of here. False dialectic. Hegelian dialectic. I mean, see, this is why I can't be talking to normies, because I get pissed off and start getting rude and shit. I mean, you got people who actually believe that Trump was onto something and in some way, shape, or form had their back, right? Even though they don't think the Democrats do, even though Trump is essentially a lifelong Democrat who just ran on the red ticket because the fucking Overton window is just all fucked up, right? Talked a whole bunch about imprisoning Hillary, did nothing about it. Why would he put his friend in prison? Fuck out of here, man. It's just, yeah, like I said, talking to normies is tiresome. But back to the topic at hand. When you ask these capitalists, well, what was the best form of capitalism, right? Like, what are we looking at? This isn't real capitalism. That isn't real capitalism. What is? They'll say probably, the United States at its inception, right? We the people. Okay. That whole thing that was built on, genocide for starters. And I ain't talking about just the buffalo, okay? But yeah, complete and utter fucking genocide. It doesn't matter, like, and just to go on another tangent, all these people who were just like, oh, they were savages, they deserved it, basically. I mean, not to say that this isn't true in some cases, but like, people are people. How are you gonna tell me that all the Redskins were savages and all the pale motherfuckers were good people? Are you retarded? Like, do you know nothing about the world? Surely there were bad people on both sides, but ultimately, it's the whiteys that came over to America, and America wasn't just Redskins. But that's a whole nother fucking rabbit hole. But anyway, right? It was the transatlantic invaders that came to America, and after they showed up, a whole bunch of fucking people died. And whenever the Saxons or the Anglo-Saxons, one and the fucking same, go somewhere like India, Africa, Eastern Europe, blood is always shed. That's just how they fucking roll. What do you want me to do about that? It's just how they roll. But no, in the Americas it was different. I mean, it's just, ideology's got all of y'all fucked up, man. Straight up. Anyway, so the Americas were, this perfect, beautiful example of capitalism. Well, okay. And that's obviously, started with the Constitution and Declaration of Independence and all of that shit, right? So, what is the Constitution? Well, it's a legal document, right? Any idiot would tell you that. Okay, it's a legal document. What does it say? We the people, blah, 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 a whole bunch of bullshit I don't give a fuck about. And then it has we the people signing the legal document, okay? Did you sign it? No. Did you give these people power of attorney? Did you even know the fucking thing was being signed when it was signed? Because from what I heard, this shit was, drafted and signed in secret, just like Davos, G8, the World Economic Forum, right? Only the initiated get to come in. Just because they were beefing with some other corporation, i.e. King George, but that don't fucking mean that they were any better than him. They just wanted a slice of their own fucking pie. That was the capitalists, right? Whereas before, power was passed through, family lines, genetic lines, for the most part. This was the lawyers and the merchants, the capitalists also, trying to get their fucking slice of the pie. But when they said we the people, they were talking about themselves. That's why they signed it and you didn't. So anybody who says that, somehow wants to invoke the Constitution as if that legal document had anything to do with them. I mean, the amount of fucking ignorance. I know what they told you in school. I know. But, they tell a whole bunch of lies in schools. Okay, so you did not sign the Constitution. That's why if you go to court and you try to claim the Constitution as giving you some kind of rights, and it's like a major land-breaking, potentially precedent-setting case, the judge is going to tell you that the Constitution is a compact that you are not a party to, and he's going to kick you the fuck out of there. They might throw this or that person a bone here and there, right? Because, they got to include you in the fucking system. But when it comes down to the real important shit, groundbreaking precedent-setting cases, they're not gonna let you get away with using the Constitution because it's a fucking contract you didn't sign, dipshit. Simple. But, when you become a citizen of the United States of America, for example, what is the oath that you give? Well, let's read. I hereby declare an oath that I absolutely and entirely renounce and abjure all allegiance and fidelity to any foreign prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty of whom or which I have heretofore been a subject or citizen. How is it that a lot of politicians in the United States have dual citizenship, right? Some of them to that little Middle Eastern nation over there, stirring shit up over there. How is it? How is that possible? Well, because they don't have to worry about this oath. That's why, anyway. Or if they do, well, they don't. If they even have to utter these words, like they're not being held to them. It is what it is. Anyway, that I will support and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States of America against all enemies. You will defend the Constitution. Okay. Let's read and see where it says that you are protected by the contract that is the Constitution, the laws set by that legal document. Because all that you're doing here to me so far is saying that you're going to be a useful idiot for the Constitution and the people to whom these laws apply. Let's see. Defend the Constitution and laws of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I will bear arms on behalf of the United States when required by law, that I will perform non-combatant service in the armed forces of the United States when required by the law, that I will perform work of national importance under civilian direction when required by the law, and that I'll take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, so help me God. right? You basically saying, hey, I'm a sucker for the Constitution. Whatever you tell me I got to do to protect the Constitution, I'm going to do it. Where in there does it say that the Constitution and the laws contained by it, set by it, apply to you? Because it's a contract you didn't sign, so it doesn't apply to you, dipshit. It's really that fucking simple. Jesus Christ, I don't understand why we gotta, like, hold people by their fucking hand, man. But, again, this is not a channel for normies, okay? This is not a channel for people who've been brainwashed and are unwilling to undo. We've all been brainwashed. I've been where you're at. And some of you are probably ahead of me. And good for you. But, like, you know, we can't even have a fucking conversation if you think that Trump at some point is going to let out all these children from New York underground and arrest all the rapists. Because you're fucking retarded. You know, I can't be talking to a retarded person. Anyway. Yeah. I support the Constitution. I will defend the Constitution. I will give my life to the Constitution. I will. Yeah. And where does it say anywhere that the Constitution will protect you? Okay, so capitalism, this pure capitalism that a lot of capitalists like to harken back to and say that was real capitalism, you know, was, I mean, you know, it's got blood on its hands for starters, and it got nothing to do with you. Basically, right? It had nothing to do with dipshits like you and I, regular people, right? This was the elites setting their laws and conning the people to do their bidding for them. That's all that was. And that's all that capitalism and socialism is, as it exists today. That's all that is. So, oh, and then they had that whole thing called slavery, and, you know, that's your fucking capitalism, basically. That's the purest form of capitalism as in practice. Well, we could theorize and ideologize about bullshit that's irrelevant because it doesn't fucking exist. Never did. Or we could talk about the real shit. What it actually is. So going back to capitalism and socialism and the relationship between the two, right? Taking each to its extreme, because that's how you know, by pitching up the contrast, you cut through the fucking noise, basically, yeah? Capitalism is private ownership of everything on this planet, and with, you know, a few caveats, if you will, or certain qualifications, way of qualifying things, explaining things. That's essentially the system that we live in. Okay, that's where I'm coming from. That's my stance. We live in a purely capitalistic system. We do. This is the way it was designed from the very beginning. This is what it is. This is how it works. Get over it. Get over it. And this is the very essence of capitalism I've been trying to get through to people. That just like socialism, state socialism, it ends up being the rule of very few over the many, right? Because if you're just allowed to accumulate land over and over centuries, maybe even millennia, right? And keep that shit in the family, well, I mean, what do you end up with? That's capitalism, right? Of course it is. It's just, you know, the line of succession is no longer as genetically rigid as it was before. There's more upward mobility for, you know, more people have been included in the game, right? But still not everybody, basically. And a lot of kings were fucking hanged. That had to happen. A lot of monarchs were disposed of because they were a fucking problem in this new world order, which was the French Revolution way back in those days, right? And the you know, Bolshevik Revolution and essentially the American Revolution, right? That was all merchants, people who riled up the proletariat against the kings because they wanted a piece of the fucking pie. Whether they called it socialism or capitalism, it was the same fucking shit. How is this so difficult? I don't know. Anyway, so once again, capitalism is where everything is privately owned, more or less, basically, pretty much. And pure socialism is where we own the fucking planet. We do. You and I. And, you know, Bill Gates too. But his piece ain't any bigger than yours. Why should it be? That man got hands like a woman. You think he's done a hard day's work in his entire life? No, he was fucking grandfathered into this bullshit. His people go all the way back to, you know, the framers, basically. At any rate, yeah, the problem with capitalism, and, you know, I'm no socialist either. Don't get that twisted. Neither one of these extremes is for me, basically. But the problem with capitalism is, as I stated in other videos, and I thought this would be easily comprehended, that there is no such thing as the commons, right? Or what you and I call, I would think, public property. It doesn't exist. They call it that because, look, a slave that doesn't know he's a slave is a lot more productive, right? Versus a slave that knows he's a slave, he's not going to work as well, which is basically what the capitalists are telling you when they compare themselves to state socialism, right? They essentially say our workers are happy because they get a bigger piece of the pie and they produce better. Innovation comes from capitalist systems because they're not as oppressive, it would seem. Right? Or the fact that you don't have any freedom, just as the person stuck in the state socialist system, is cleverly hidden from you with legalese and, you know, certain privileges you may get, but the reason why you're getting them is because, you know, your country is robbing that other country over there. Or some other third party that they whooped their ass and won the right to exploit that country, right? Proxy wars is what I'm talking about. Right? Proxy wars, like Afghanistan. The Reds and the Red, White, and Blues have been fighting over that land for many, many years. Everybody's been fighting over that land for many, many years. What's over there, right? Who knows, right? What's over there? Why do we want it so badly? Why do people want it? Anyway, long story short, someone also had come around making the claim that capitalism is better than this or that, right? And the obvious go-to is usually socialism. Oh, it's better because I say so. But when you actually look at what capitalism is and think about it on your own, well, maybe you need a little bit of help from somebody else. But instead of just listening to all the brainwashing, trying to step away from that and think for yourself, see if you could jive with what I'm about to say, maybe. When you look at this system where everything is privately owned, and logically, because you get grandfathered in, basically, right? Everything that your family has accumulated, unless you fuck up or do something real bad, you know, your descendants get to own and build upon, and then descendants own that, and they just get more and more and more land and more capital, more and more power, right? Look at what Bill Gates is doing right now. Buying up as much land as possible. And trust me, the contracts that he signs don't look nothing like the contracts that you're signing when you think you're buying land. No, that motherfucker is buying land. Anyway, for a system such as capitalism to say that and you correct me if I got this wrong, okay? Because this is how it's being presented to me. I know it ain't like that, but this is what I'm supposed to believe, I think, right? A system that upholds private ownership and everybody's equal right to own private property, right? But like if all I can ever own in my life is a couple of hectares, and some other motherfucker can own, you know, thousands and hundreds of thousands of hectares. How the fuck do we have equal rights, right? I mean, we don't. Even if I had the money to buy this much shit, I wouldn't be allowed to. Rest assured. Anyway, for a system to, on the one hand, uphold the idea of private property, okay, where the logical conclusion is just more and more land in fewer hands, right? This is where we find ourselves because it's just what happens. Obviously, that's capitalism. That's the essence of capitalism. It is, right? For a system to result in a planet where every single piece of land is already privately owned and they ain't giving it up, because why would they, right? It's never going to be truly public unless we just take it by force. It's never going to be a common, right? For a system that leads to that, and on the other hand says that everybody has equal right to private property, well, that system has an inherent fucking contradiction in it, does it not? It's self-refuting, void, invalid. It's a whole bunch of fucking bullshit. So my question to you, dear viewer, is how can something be better than something else when it isn't even fucking good? Thanks for watching.